military group, I think, that cares about the technology part of that. But, you know, I don't, he's, you know, if that's the way they want to do
episode of the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and we have our usual announcements to make tonight before we get started. Like always, for tonight's program, I would love to have the audience's input with questions and comments. So you can email them to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com. You can also email me with questions from previous guests, and I'll try and get those answered for you as well. Now, for all of you Facebookers out there, we do have a Facebook group specifically used for the radio program and providing an easy way for everyone to make comments or ask questions about the program in general. Now, I don't monitor the page very closely during the program, so that's just not the best way to get a question asked during the program with a specific guest. So use the email for that. Once again, that's giascott@exogenynetwork.com. And some more information for you all out there. I also have an author page on Facebook, and I would like everyone to come and like my author page as a form of support. So you can also find out what's going on with what I write. And tonight's guest is a rare treat for me, somebody I've been familiar with for decades, and also happen to be one of his many fans. So I would like to welcome Piers Anthony to the program. Piers, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, it is Piers Anthony. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say at this point. I'm an old man. In 1 week I'll be 79 years old, and I'm still writing. I still live for writing, and I'm glad to have readers like you and anybody else.
Yeah, I have to admit, it's been, you know, I rarely get an opportunity to talk to anyone that I've known as long as I've been reading your books even. I can't even begin to say that I've read all of them because I know I haven't. You're most well known for the series Xanth, I think it's pronounced, X-A-N-T-H?
Xanth, yes.
Okay. It's a fun series. You want to just tell everybody a little bit about the ideas behind it?
Okay. First of all, is the name. When I needed a name for, I didn't know it was a series. I thought it was a novel, but I needed a name for my magic land, and there was a name I'd liked, Xanthe, X-A-N-T-H-E. I'd had it in a story. The story never sold, so the name was left over. So when I needed a fantasy name, I said, okay, I chopped the E off it, made it Xanth, and that became my magic land. Now, that land is actually the state of Florida, translated, a little magic added. The map of Xanth, as many of you will have seen, is exactly the shape of Florida. Well, almost exactly. Some details have changed. The Florida Keys have become a larger island where the centaurs live, and things like that. But still, it's suspiciously close, because in Florida you have Lake Okeechobee. Well, in Xanth it's the Lake Okeechobee, where the ogres live. And where we live is near the Withlacoochee River in Xanth. That's the With-a-Cookie River, where cookies grow by the side of the river.
Ah.
And further inland, there's Lake Wales, which is spelled W-A-I-L-S. There's a whaling monster that runs along the surface of the lake and leaves little footprints on it. And they call these footprints the prints of Wales. Xanth is puns everywhere you look. And of course the puns started because when I got into fantasy, I just couldn't take it seriously. Science fiction was serious, historical fiction was serious, fantasy wasn't. And so the jokes came in, the humor and the puns. Later on in my career, as I got more into it, I was able to write more serious fantasy. But Xanth was set. Xanth was always light. Hardly any pun is too egregious for Xanth.
Well, I have to admit, I love the series, okay? I'm, ever so much more than 20 as the saying goes. But it's something that I'll look for when I want something entertaining and light and just plain fun. I mean, we don't all eat ice cream sundaes, for all of our meals, but there's nothing wrong with an occasional one. And I really, really enjoy the books. They're just plain fun. I can't imagine anybody not enjoying them.
Reviewers don't. Critics don't.
Yeah, but see, I think they like serious stuff.
That's just one of those things. Nobody likes it except the readers. And most of the readers do like it.
Well, I think that's a plus. I mean, what good is it to write a book that the critics love and nobody wants to read?
Yes, a theory of mine that the critics are failed writers who didn't make it, and so they bring their attitudes into reviewing and commenting and trying to take apart the work of writers who are successful at writing.
Well, you have this knack of just grabbing somebody's imagination and pretty much holding them enthralled.
Yes, I've been told that. Because for the last couple of decades, I've been trying to figure out what it is I do that grabs and holds the reader. I want to know so that I can be sure not to stop doing it, because it's more or less accidental. I write the way it pleases me to write, and that seems to work. But if I don't really know what I'm doing, I might lose it at some point. And I
would say that if you haven't lost it by now, I don't think you're gonna.
Yes.
You happen to be one of the most prolific writers in the modern world, especially that's still writing. You've written an immense number of books compared to the average author.
Yes, at present it's up to about 160 books.
Well, I knew, it was more than I'd read. And I've read probably 30, 40, 50. I don't know. I never sat down and counted them. It's fun. And they're books that I pick up again. You keep them on your shelf, and here comes that rainy day or whatever kind of day, and you want something, you want that ice cream sundae again. You go and you grab it off the shelf, and there you are, right back in the same story. And for me, it's just as entertaining, even if I've read it 100 times before.
Many readers do read them. Many write to me. They've read my novels many more times than I have. And they say, I'm reading The Spell for Chameleon the 17th time, something like that. I get bored if I read a book more than once. I very seldom reread. But one of the things I like, that there is, it used to be that teenagers would read stuff, it was pretty junky, but they'd like it, then they'd come back a generation later and look at it and say, how could I have read that junk? Well, I've never had that comment on mine. The teenagers who like it, they come back and say they're in their 40s this time, and they say, I still like it for different reasons. That's fine. So apparently they're well enough written so that they stand up.
Well, I don't know. How many years ago did you start the Xanth series? I don't even know when you started it.
The first novel was published in 1977.
All right, most novels, especially in the fantasy, by now, they redate it. I mean, when you read them, you can tell this is, vintage material. Yours stay fresh. I don't know how you do it.
Yes. Well, I did from the start. I tried to make it not too closely connected to our world so that you don't find a present-day slang or anything in Xanth. It is its own. It uses its own language, its own jokes, and so on. So that makes it independent. So that you don't read it and say, oh, that was dated 10 years ago, because it's more or less dateless. I try to write that way. Now, the puns, of course, could get dated. You know, what's hot now may not be hot.
You know, I don't know. You know, things like the adult conspiracy. It was cute. I'm trying to think of how long. Probably 25 years ago, or somewhere in that realm. You know, the first time I read a book that contained the comment "adult conspiracy." You know, telling somebody about the idea now, it doesn't sound like it's something from when, you know, I was a whole lot closer to 20 than I am now. You know, it's still just as fresh and just as tongue-in-cheek and fun as always.
Yes, that adult conspiracy wasn't there at the very beginning of Xanth, but along about the novel Dragon on a Pedestal, had Princess Ivy was 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I forget, and she was really objecting to this adult conspiracy. Wouldn't tell her things she wanted to know, like where babies came from. As far as she knew, you know, it was either a stork or a cabbage leaf, and so then I just built on that, and it's a lot of fun playing with it because all the children object to it, and they all swear that when they grow up, they're going to abolish that, and then when they grow up, they join it. They turn adults and they betray the kingdom of childhood. And the remaining children who haven't turned adult yet are deeply disgusted by that, and yet it goes on. It's sort of like trying to root out corruption in the mundane world. You try, but it never happens.
Yeah. Well, you know, and there again, too, it's the books that you write, despite the fact that the adult conspiracy exists, they don't venture into areas that even the most conservative parent would be worried about their young adult child.
Well, not much. I have had objections. We have a lot of fun with panties in Xanth. Men see a girl's panties, they freak out. I will have some readers objecting to that. That's too much sexuality for them. So
you know, I can remember being a little girl, and because I grew up in the era when girls had to wear dresses to school, and I was not the most ladylike of young ladies, and I wore shorts under my dress because you didn't want anyone to see your panties.
Yes.
You know, and it sort of goes hand in hand with those memories. Maybe generations that have grown up without that forcing you to wear dresses thing don't get it as well as those of us who did. You know, it's fun.
Maybe it is getting to be a dated pun. And of course, in Xanth, we take it further that if their nymphs were completely nude, they don't freak anybody out. They're not wearing panties.
Right, right. Yeah, you know, and all the characters, these you know, things like centaurs and the ogres and all these characters and the boot rear and all that kind of stuff. It's tongue-in-cheek mixed with mythology, blended into this wonderful new mixture. And you know, I guess most of us have read the books and thought, you know, the guy that wrote this stuff has to have a very, very bizarre imagination.
Well,
because
I have concluded. I look around and I look at the imagination of other people and other writers and so on, and my private conclusion that I have about as much imagination as anyone I've seen. Of course, it used to get me in trouble. Well, I like to tell people when I was a child, I had to go 2.5 miles through the forest to school, and a monster would follow me. And I'd stop, the monster would stop. I'd turn around quickly, and the monster would hide behind a tree. I never could see it, but I always knew it was following me and getting closer and closer, and I was genuinely frightened of it. Well, that was as a child. As an adult, I love monsters now. They're great. They come into Xanth all the time. But obviously I had the imagination all along. I just made a different use of it now as an adult.
Right. Well, I have a monster. He's with me tonight. He's always with me. I usually don't use the name Monster, but his name is Fear. He's a little green guy, and he sits on my shoulder, and he whispers in my ear all the time. And as long as he's sitting there whispering, I know exactly where he is and what he's doing, and I can pretty much ignore him. But the day he jumps off my shoulder and he's no longer there, oh, boy, I better look out. Something bad's going to happen. Sort of like rats abandoning the ship. And also blame, everybody's inflicted with bad things that happen to them for no particular reason. Nothing you can really do anything about. It's just, this random acts of chaos descend upon you. And those are inflicted on me by the Ladies of Fate. Now, the Ladies of Fate are sort of like the Red Hat Society ladies, but on crack. I mean, really loud makeup, gaudy jewelry, strange mismatched clothes, complete with, jewel-toned shoes and striped socks, and too much lipstick. The works. Green eyeshadow, blue eyeshadow, really loud colors. And they sit in a jury box, sort of like Ironsides for people who are old enough to remember Ironsides. And, they sit up in the clouds in this jury box, and they look down at the world, and they cackle with laughter. There's 12 of them because it's jury, And they throw down these lightning bolts of these random acts of chaos just to see what you're going to do. But you never want to tick them off because then they can throw down some really bad ones. Yeah, I make up these bizarre characters that sort of smooth out the speed bumps of life. So I guess I really identified with your use of the characters in your books.
Whether it's me or you seem to be fading out.
Well, you sound fine to me, so maybe I started fading out there. But yeah, the whole imaginary characters, to me they make absolute sense because I've always had imaginary characters hanging around. And then, as I was raising my own daughter, she had imaginary friends. One was named Boyfriend, and then she had a twin sister and twin brother named Gasoline and Gasolina. I don't know where she came up with those names, but that was her imaginary crew. And Boyfriend was always telling her to do things she shouldn't do. Yeah, so she did have a whole suite of imaginary characters, probably from about 3 until 5 or 6. I think they went away about then.
Yeah. Well, I've read that about half of the children have imaginary friends. And I think back, I didn't have any imaginary friends. So apparently I was remiss in that respect.
Maybe you were saving it up for later.
Maybe, because I get to know the characters in my novels. Many of them I know better than I know a number of real people.
Yeah, now, so one of the characters, didn't you have a monster under the bed as well?
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely one a lot of people can identify with. In my daughter's case, it was the monster in the closet.
Yes, the monster under the bed, I made much use of that in the novel Golem in the Gears, because Golem made a deal and was riding the monster under the bed to go elsewhere, found a special disposition so it could get out from under the bed. Had a little fun. The monster wound up at the fawn and the nymph retreat. They set up a bed there, and the nymphs had a ball with that. They dangled their feet off the edge and would grab it and said, "Oh, he's all hands." The monster under the bed is all hands, literally. In fact, the fan even made a little one with 5 hands. That's all it is. And I keep that one under my keyboard. So, So, yes, it's fun. And, of course, it's one of those things, every child believes in a monster under the bed, and no adult does. It's part of the adult conspiracy. These things just disappear when a child grows up.
Yeah.
So there's some, it reminds me when my elder daughter, she was a teenager, and she finally said to me, challenging, "Daddy, when will I stop being a child?" And I said, well, when you stop being afraid of the dark. And she was silent, and she never brought the subject up again.
Well, in that case, I still qualify as a child, because I have to confess, I don't like the dark inside the house. Now, why? I can go camping. There can be not a light around me, not a moon shining for, 20, 30 miles in all directions. I'm fine with that kind of dark. But I absolutely despise dark in the house.
It's interesting. I think most people would be the opposite way. The house is familiar, so they could handle it, but that outside is unfamiliar, and they would be frightened.
Well, maybe that's why. The outside, to me, is very familiar, because I've spent a great deal of my life outside, camping and hiking in remote areas, and I'm okay with that. Animals don't scare me. People do.
Yes, and there I share your concern, because there are movies take place in the forest, and people find them terrifying. I don't. Those bore me. What frightens me is the big city.
Yeah.
And
the random acts of chaos when they involve another human being can be a lot scarier than things that go bump in the woods.
Yes. As I said, I had to walk several miles to school. It was through the forest. There really wasn't anything dangerous in the forest, apart from my imagination. But in the city, I didn't let my own daughters walk to school. I took them, because there are people in the city, and they can be dangerous, especially to children, especially to little girls.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the first lessons I taught my kids was never let a stranger touch you. I figured if the stranger can't touch them, they can't grab them, right? So don't let a stranger touch you. Back away, run away, whatever, but don't let them touch you. And that worked fine and dandy. And then when my kids were, my son, who was the youngest, he was 9 and his sister was 16, 17. They were in a car accident with some friends that they'd gone to a county fair with. And when the ambulance got there and was trying to get my son onto the backboard and stuff, because he'd been knocked out, he hadn't been breathing, things, he probably wasn't thinking very clearly. Anyhow, they reached out to touch him, and he reverted to that early lesson that he'd probably gotten from the time he was about a year old. Don't let a stranger touch you. And he took off screaming down the road, screaming the few obscenities, which, all 9-year-olds know, at least a few, at them and telling them that they were not going to touch him. And one of the other kids that had been in the accident with him ended up tackling him. I fail to understand the logic. This kid's just been tackled, but now we're going to put him on a backboard and tape him down to transport him. But, yeah, okay. Needless to say, he was fine. He'd been cut up and stuff, but yeah, he reverted to that lesson of don't touch me, right down to the policeman and the ambulance people too. So it was nice to know that the lesson sunk in, but no, when the chips were down and he wasn't thinking clearly, that was the only thing he remembered. Don't let him touch me. Yeah. So.
Yes, of course, children don't have the experience of adults, so they don't know when a basic rule should be abridged or changed, and that's the process of growing up, really.
Yeah, learning the you need life experience to make a decision with too many variables, and that's why children are minors and their parents are supposed to make decisions for them. Is because they do lack that life experience. Now, while Xanth is probably your best known series, I know you've written some other ones. You want to tell the audience a little bit about some of the other series?
Oh, I've done almost more than I can count. There was my Adept series, which first labeled The Apprentice Adept. That was the editor's title, not mine. That was one. I expected to have a lot of negative comment on it that I didn't get. The reason was because there are science fiction readers and there are fantasy readers, and never the twain were supposed to meet. They talked about fantasy polluting the science fiction and things like that. So I set up the first Adept novel, Split Infinity, with hard science side with domes because it was all polluted outside. And then opposite it, the world of Fays, which was all magic with herds of unicorns, packs of werewolves, and so on. And they put them together, even got the publisher, Del Rey. They had a symbol for their fantasy and they had another symbol for their science fiction. They put both symbols on the novel.
Uh-huh.
So there they were, mixed, and one person crossing back and forth between them, the rules all changing. I don't think I got a single protest. I was sort of disappointed. All the business about polluting the fantasy or science fiction didn't happen. People liked the series.
Yeah, it's funny because now, we have this sci-fi fantasy sort of genre. Not all places are going to list it, but it does include facets from both areas. It's science fiction with a fantasy in it.
And of course, straight science fiction is really science fantasy, because if you get into a spaceship and travel at 8 times the speed of light to another star, that's fantasy. It's not going to happen. You see, science fiction is supposed to be something that could happen. It may not have happened yet, but it could. So that's a lot of it is really science fantasy.
Yeah, and they have made up things. I mean, even Star Trek is probably the best known sci-fi series ever, and they have made up things that don't exist, particles don't exist, elements that don't exist, and so forth and so on. Will they ever exist? Well, maybe they might take the names they used in that series.
I doubt that you'll ever have people being beamed up or down.
No, I doubt it too. And replicators, I think it's a wonderful idea, but I don't know how that could actually be possible. I mean, the 3D printers that they've come about with lately.
That's the definition, but it is fun. Yeah, and so that was one series, and another one was my Incarnations of Immortality series. That started with On a Pale Horse, and that has its own story. Actually, everything I do has its own story. It's Death who rides the pale horse. That's why On a Pale Horse was the man who became Death. I had that. For those not familiar with that series, the key is that Death is an office, and an ordinary person can step into the office if conditions are right, and then he has to do the job of Death. The way he got the office, he was upset. He was going to commit suicide. He put the gun to his head, and just as he was about to pull the trigger, Death came for him. He saw the hooded figure, and he was so freaked out he turned the gun and he shot Death instead. And Death fell dead, and he had to take over Death's position. So then, of course, with the other novels, I went on the figure of time, of fate, of war, of nature, and finally to evil and good, Satan and good with God, where they wound up needing to replace God because the regular God had just wasn't paying any attention to the universe anymore. I waited to the last 2 novels for that because I thought it would be too controversial, but apparently it wasn't. People could handle it. There was another series. Now, other ones, there are ones that are less well known because they did not receive major publication. One was my Geodesy series. This is historical. Covers the last 8 million years of the history of mankind in the globe. Major series of my career. Almost unknown because big publishers weren't as interested. Actually, it did get, Tor did publish some of those. And there's fantasy also, what I call my Chromagic series. This is a world with volcanoes. The volcanoes are all different colors, color is a different kind of magic. So that a red volcano erupts with red dust and gas, and the people who live there absorb it, and they can do red magic. A blue volcano, the people in that vicinity can do blue magic. If a red magic person goes to the blue magic one, he loses his power. It doesn't work anymore. And I think there's one that erupts white magic, and the others find that peculiar because it's what we call science. The science rules obtained there. And all the different types of magic, they don't understand that at all. Each of these, there are 5 novels, each is 250,000 words long. I regard it as my best fantasy. As I say, it's not widely known, simply because it's with a small publisher, Mundania Press, and they don't have the facilities to, they can't print 100,000 copies in hardcover, anything like that, you see.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, just another one of my series, and I have, well, let's see, I've gone through,
we did the Adept, we did the,
there was the Cluster series, that was 5 novels. In Cluster, the assumption was that Earth was advanced, but the further out it made colonies, the less advanced they were. They were unable to maintain them, so when you got 100 light years out, a colony would be back at the Stone Age. And so you get them all mixed. That was sort of fun to do. And there was what I call my Bio the Space Tyrant series. That was a hard-hitting science fiction novel involving piracy in space. The first novel started with a gang rape, and it went downhill from there. And one of the things I knew was that no Xanth reader would ever want to get close to that series. Then I started getting fan letters. Somebody say, my 2 favorite series are Xanth and Space Tyrant. So I sure did not know my readers.
Well, I think you have a very diverse lot. Now, I did, when I was looking online, the Wikipedia entries that was online said that some of your series have been optioned for movie rights. But we haven't seen any movies with them yet.
Yes, they have been. There's been chronic interest in the movie. I've never gotten a movie yet. Xanth has had several options, and we're now negotiating for another option. But you see, an option, the company buys the right for a year or 18 months or so to make the movie. But then they may pass it up. Warner Pictures had an option for 4 years on Xanth. And then at the end, they didn't make the movie. Since they paid for the option, I got money for that. But, so there's just, even when you have an option, it's hard to get a movie. Disney has an option on a pale horse, and they exercised the option. They actually paid $250,000 for it, and then never made the movie. Some of these outfits amaze me. They've got money. I mean, I wouldn't spend $250,000 for anything, and not then
and not use it. Yeah. Well, you know, we've recently seen the popularity of the Harry Potter series. We've seen the popularity of the Hunger Games. You know, and that's 2 books, you know, that are, one was a series, and, well, I guess the Hunger Games, there's a second one. I haven't read the book, and I don't know if the movie is being produced or not. But, you know, you see this popularity happening, and you think about the Xanth series, and I'm like, oh, they could make hundreds of programs, you know, movies out of the Xanth series. I mean, that could go on into infinity, as far as I can see, simply because it's so entertaining. Now, if they could make, you know, the Lord of the, or Yeah, Lord of the Rings. If they could do that,
yes.
if they could do that in a movie, if they could do Harry Potter into movies, surely they can come up with a way to do the Xanth series. Because I haven't been in the theater in over a decade. That might drag me into a theater.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand their reasoning. To me that movies will work just fine. But apparently the moguls who have the money to make these have a different mindset, and they're not all that interested in Xanth.
I find that amazing, actually. Actually, you know, the series with death and whatnot in them, that one too, I could see making a very intriguing.
The Incarnation series.
Yeah, the Incarnation series. That would be a very intriguing movie. It's a much shorter series, but it would be a very intriguing movie because of this twisting together of the, you know, as you call it, the mundane world and this fantasy world. You know, it's all wound together, and you know, I think it would. It'd be highly entertaining.
Incarnations is a merging of fantasy and science fiction. Yes, I had some fun there. They, well, one where even hell had ads, and car companies had competitive ads with flying carpets. You know, a flying carpet company would show a picture of cars all jammed in a traffic jam and said you'd already be there if you were on the carpet. But one of my favorites, they had it even illustrated on the cover, but then it got erased, and so the public didn't see it. That was a billboard, hell running a billboard, showing a lovely starlet in a short skirt, and a little devil, little devil was lifting a little bit of her skirt. You know, he wanted to peek under it, and the billboard said, "You won't see that in heaven." No, you won't. In other words, you want to see flesh, go to hell. And all this was as I say, they actually had that billboard on the cover of the novel. The artist drew it, but they erased it, and it was the way it was published is just blank. You see the billboard, but you don't see anything on it. It's too bad. I guess they lost their nerve.
I guess so. Well, publishers are sort of a mystery to the real world because, especially right now, we're seeing this explosion of independent authors hitting the market. And the next question sort of is, with this explosion of electronic media, have you begun to publish your books digitally as well?
Oh, yes. I'm trying to get all of my books published or republished in digital editions. There are a lot of them, so it's taking some time to process them. And I'm doing new novels digitally and self-publishing them, too. Self-publishing sort of goes along with it because it's much easier to self-publish digitally than it is in hardcovers, for example.
Right. I mean, even most published on demand.
And I think it's good. It allows all the writers to do it, to get their books out there, at least. In the past, if you didn't get the nod of a publisher, nobody would ever know you existed.
Yeah, and your publisher determined really how popular you had the potential to be because they also controlled the publicity.
Yes. I've been collaborating more recently with J.R. Rain. He became I believe he was rejected by traditional publishers, so he self-published a novel about a housewife who was a vampire and a detective. And it became a super bestseller. I mean, like number 1, 2, or 3, on the list. Did very well. And so now he's a highly successful author, but he would have been nowhere under the traditional system. This
explosion of digital media has meant that lots of people, sort of obscure niches that before a traditional publishing house would never touch.
Yes.
Now it's available to us.
Yes, you get to try it, and I think that's good. I think that means that literature will do much better for this because so many more people get a chance.
It's sort of the digital media is the Emancipation Proclamation for authors.
Yes, because anybody can try. And of course, I think of it as a parallel to genetics, would you believe? There are mutations, and about 99 out of 100 mutations are bad, are deleterious, and the animals, the creatures with these don't survive well. But the 1 in 100 or so that is good spreads and takes over, and that accounts for progress. And so you start advancing and your species becomes superior to what it was because of the mutation. Well, yeah. I see it in publishing now. Anybody can get, maybe 99 of their novels are bad, but the one that's good can be very good, and it would never have had a chance without the new order, without self-publishing, without digital publishing, without a chance for the author to make the decision instead of somebody who seemed to be stuck in the mud in publishing.
Yeah, I know that I read a lot of independent author materials because I happen to really like the digital format. I'm disabled. I have an arm that doesn't work very well, and physically holding a book is not the best thing in the world to make me happy. So, when I have the opportunity to read it, I happen to use a digital reader on my computer. It's so much easier. I mean, I can read again like I did, 20, 30 years ago. And some days I might go through 2 or 3 novels in one day, especially if I'm interviewing a lot of authors close together. I might read a lot of books. And, when I do that, I've seen some stuff that I'm like, oh, this is terrible. But most of what I'm seeing now is good.
Yes, and the format, I use my wife as a case history because she was dedicated to the physical paperback novel. She reads them in a couple of years. She'd donate a car full, literally, to the library. I mean, she's reading all the time. And so this business of digital, she wasn't sure about that. But the problem was she couldn't get the novel she wanted in the stores. We don't have a bookstore in our county now. And they have books in the grocery store, but they list only the top 10 sales. Nothing else is there. And so she was frustrated, so she tried the digital reader. And she has a Kindle. And in the last 2 or 3 years, she's gotten more and more. She found that she never runs out with the Kindle. If she runs out, she puts in an order for another one, and she has it in minutes, and she can start reading the next novel. Yeah. And she likes that. And the reader really is about the size of a hardcover book. It's not bad. So you do have to hold it up, although she has a little prop. She just props it on the table in front of her, so she doesn't have to hold it. And it works fine. So I see if it can convince her, it's going to convince a lot of people to change over.
I have to admit, the first time I was exposed to digital format, it wasn't Kindle or Nook or any of those, and I don't remember what format it was. I think probably PDF. And an author sent me the book that she'd published the novel digitally with some company. And so I read the book. I had her on as a guest, and it happened to be a paranormal romance, which that's interesting. It's, a strange kind of genre. I mean, I'm like having a love affair with a ghost. That doesn't make any sense to me, but okay. But it was a well-written book, and I had her on as on the program, and that was the first time, and I was like, well, I don't know if I like that, and I really didn't mess with it for a long time. But my loss of the use of my right arm use was kind of sudden. It was due to an accident. And in the recovery period, that's when I really started looking at the digital books more. And over the last year or so, it's like, I really like this. And now I ask often for authors that are going to appear, do you have the digital format? And because it is so much easier for me. Besides that, because of the fact that my husband also hosts a show, we got so many books in the mail. And before long, you've got stacks of books everywhere. I mean, you're knocking them over, you're spilling them over, the shelves are sagging, and you still got books, and you can never find the one you're looking for, and so because you're just being overwhelmed. Right. So I find that having a digital library means that I can find it much quicker and easier.
Yes, you can have 100 books on one reader, literally, and you can read any of them. They're all there.
Yeah, and in my digital library, I'm getting close to 4,000 books now. Yeah. Just in the Kindle alone. And I also have PDF books and books for Nook and so forth and so on. So I have this immense library that's now rivaling my physical library. And anybody who moves very often, I just moved a year ago. We had stuff in storage for 2 years. Okay, most of our books were in storage. And so then moving all this stuff, books are heavy.
Yes, remember about a decade or more ago, we were seriously considering going to a retirement community, getting older. And everything was as represented. It was all very nice and so on. But once we looked at it, we found that we didn't want to go. And the big thing was, I said, I've got 3,000 books in my library. I'm not going to give them up. But they would have filled and overflowed the facilities that I could have gotten at the retirement community. There wouldn't have been any room for me. And so we decided to stay home where we can have all the books and other things that we want. In our house, everywhere. They're on the shelves, they're in the closets, they're piled on the floor. Books are everywhere, and I won't give up a single one of them. Non-readers don't understand that. I imagine you do.
Yeah, I do understand that. And many of them I refer to off, because I'll admit probably 3/4 of the physical books we have in the house are nonfiction of one type or another. I had kind of quit reading fiction because we had so many nonfiction books to read.
Yes.
So I just kind of got out of the habit. I didn't have time for fantasy.
Yes, well, I read fiction for business. I read nonfiction for pleasure.
It was kind of the other way around for us, but we were being consumed by this various kinds of nonfiction, and I discovered I recently did a series featuring mostly independent fiction authors, and I read all kinds of genres that I normally would never touch. Young adult, children's, romance. All sorts of stuff that I normally would never read. I would have never been introduced to these people and their books if it hadn't been for saying, okay, I sort of did a general call. I'm looking for authors to appear on the show, and then picked out a lot that I got. And didn't necessarily pick for genre so much as I wanted people who'd done some quality stuff, whatever genre they were in. And I wanted a wide spectrum. So I did. I got that. But I rediscovered the joy of reading fiction. I think, I got serious.
Yes, well, of course.
I'd forgotten about dance and all the ice cream sundae concept. And the monsters under the bed, too. The adult conspiracy had swallowed me. And it's fun to rediscover the fun side of yourself again. So now I make a point of at least once a week I read a piece of fiction, whatever kind. And, it's fun. And we all need a little fun in our lives. So sometimes we do get too caught up in the business of living.
It is fun. As I say, when I read fiction for business, and a lot of what I read, I get authors will send me their book, first-time authors. They want to get an opinion on it. And some of this is amateur fiction. It's not well done, which is a problem for me because I don't want to break somebody's heart, but I don't want to, I do want to tell them the truth about it. So a lot of it isn't that much fun to read because I'm trying to think. I say, how can I tell this author something that will do him some good without really upsetting him? And so I can't just read for the pure pleasure. Now, once in a while, I'll get one, and it just carries me away. And it's great, and that's fun. I love that. But more often, it's in between. I have to assess, tell them what's what. You get some authors, they don't know how to paragraph, for example. There are no paragraphs. Well, you sort of have to explain that sort of thing to them.
Right. Right. And I know that in the independent author material I've read, I've encountered some that were really, really bad. That you are pretty certain that this person didn't speak English as a first language, and maybe not as a second. Especially if it's in the nonfiction, category where they're telling you how to do something, and they didn't take time to make sure their grammar and punctuation was right. Why would anybody want to take what they've written too seriously? They didn't care enough about the material to put any effort into editing.
It depends how smart they are. I had one I was asked to sort of mentor him, and I had to say, it's clear that English is not your first language, and this simply isn't going to work for an English audience. And he said he'd keep working on it. A couple of years later, he sent me another manuscript and said, "How's that?" And I looked at it, and I had to say, there's no evidence that English isn't your first language. This is perfect in English. I mean, in the interim, apparently he'd learned, and he'd gotten it right. And he'll no doubt be a good author.
And that's always positive, and that's the case of where, that old saying about sometimes it's cruel to be kind. You probably, by offering some sincere criticism and pointing him into where his weaknesses were, you in fact did him a kindness, because it made him go out and improve his language abilities. Yes.
I try to be helpful. Now, there are authors that like to criticize. They seem to get a joy out of bringing a new author to tears or whatever, and I don't. I'm trying genuinely to be helpful, but some people really do need the help.
Yeah, I write a lot of reviews for books, and recently, just in the past few months, we changed how we did it. We used to post them on our website, and we no longer do that. I now put all the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. It's the only two places I post them. We don't have them on our website at all anymore, because I felt that was probably going to do authors the most good, especially since a lot of them we're reviewing their very first book. The thing is that not all of them that I'm reading are the potential guests. Sometimes I've randomly gotten this material. And I used to write some probably not very nice reviews. When I really hated a book, it really came through in the reviews. And sometimes I really hated the book. I didn't care if they were famous or not. Sometimes I really hated some well-known authors' books. It bored me to tears. Reading it was like reading War and Peace. Okay, I've never gotten into that one either. Never finished it. It was just, they were horrible to me. They were misery. It was an assignment.
In high school, reading Dostoevsky in Russian, and the more I read it, the worse I felt. And finally, I reported to the infirmary. It turned out I had the measles. I thought it was the book that was doing it to me.
Yeah, I can remember having the measles. I was, I think, 30 that year. That was not a good year to get the measles. But yeah, I could imagine you reading a book you didn't like and getting sick at the same time. Yeah, it would really put you down on that particular author. I've become a little bit kinder, I guess, the last months, because I began to realize really how devastating a bad review can be. I don't necessarily sugarcoat it so much as put a little bit more thought into how I'm saying, I really thought this stunk.
Yes, I have a parallel for that. Once I used to play ping pong when I was in high school and college and in the Army, and I was a pretty good ping pong player. played in some tournaments and so on. I was playing doubles with another person, and it was frustrating because he kept slamming the ball and missing the table by about 6 inches. 1, 2, 3. He just kept doing it. Yeah, it was washing out our team. But I found a positive way to address it. He was thinking he was aiming for the table, but he tended to go high, and I said, aim for the net. Aim for the net. He hit it a couple of times, then aim a little higher on the net. And after that, he just started hitting the table. All his slams were hitting. Yeah, I'd found the key to enable him to play well. I'd like to do that in writing. If there were something I could tell an author is really missing it, give him one hint. He says, oh, does it? And suddenly be good. Now, it generally isn't that easy for a writer. Writing is more complicated. But still, I look for it.
Almost every book I've read, no matter how awful it was, has some redeeming merit in it, some strength. Yes. I remember I read a romance, which isn't something I usually prefer, and it was a historical romance, and the characters and the basic precept behind the story was fantastic, but it didn't go anywhere. It just sort of let them drift around and never developed the characters or the plot. Yeah, and I was really disappointed at the end, but I had something positive to say about it.
Typically, I notice that a new writer will have ideas all over the place, but he won't be very good at expressing them. An experienced writer can really express it well. He just doesn't have anything to say. Getting the combination is hard, but the new writers will develop. I've seen ones, even professional writers I've seen over the years, how some of them get much sharper as they go, as they learn.
Well, I'm sure skills, and nobody could say that you haven't put a great deal of effort into honing your skills. You've been doing it a long time, and your skills should be very good. But, folks, it is time for us to take a short break, so don't leave your computer. We'll be right back with more from our guest, Piers Anthony. Okay.
Reach out, touch space. Run.
If you are listening to the show and wish to join us in the chat room, visit paltalk.com. Go to the social issues, select Other, and enter the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hello, this is Angela Thomas with a message about living life to the fullest. As a psychic clairvoyant, I often give insights to one's career path, financial situation, or relationship. Whether one is happy or not in their current situation, where he or she is right now is an important part of learning valuable lessons that can lead to fulfilling one's life purpose. If I can offer you insights, feel free to contact me at 636-278-2272, again 636-278-2272, or visit my website, angelathomas.org. I'm considered a psychic, so I provide accurate and detailed psychic readings for individuals as well as groups. Remember, no matter what influences your life at the moment, live life to the fullest. Stay in gratitude, count your blessings, and prepare yourself for more opportunities around the corner. I'm Psychic Angela Thomas, and my website is angelathomas.org.
Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to the Mind Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night.
And along with my co-host Victor the Voice Harmon with Second Sight NYC. Victor, who do we have as a guest this week?
Chris, our guest this week is Brad Olson. Brad is a travel writer, publisher, and author of the book Sacred Places North America, 108 Destinations.
Victor, I'm going to the 109th destination where no man has ever gone before. Rosie O'Donnell's bed.
Oh, Rosie, oh girl, oh Rosie, oh girl, steal away now, steal away, baby, steal away.
Join us for Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, August 9th through 11th. A weekend of exploration into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, and new evidence of ongoing contact. A weekend of films, panels, lectures, and workshops will feature leading experts including George Noory and many more of some of the most important theorists and scientists in the field. Enter to win a free ticket at contactinthedesert.net. See you at Joshua Tree Retreat Center in August for Contact in the Desert, 760-365-8371.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dawn of Shades. We just went on our break, and tonight's guest is Piers Anthony, and he happens to be something kind of rare for me. It's an author that I've been a long-time fan of, and I hope everyone is enjoying hearing from him as much as I am. Now, before we get started with our conversation again, I did want to tell everybody where you can go to find out what books are coming out, what have recently come out. You can go to www.highpiers.com. That's spelled HIPIERS.com, and you can find out which books are coming out next. Now, Piers, while we were on break, you told me a wonderful story when I asked you about whether or not you wrote the same physical way now as you did when you were initially writing. And so I'd like you to tell the story again and share it with the audience.
Okay, if it doesn't bore them, well, if it doesn't bore you, maybe it won't bore them. Okay, it goes back into my family life when I stayed home to take care of my little girl because I was home writing. I was available, and my wife went out to work to earn our living because the first year I wrote, I earned a total of $160, and that wasn't enough to maintain a family on. So. But my little girl was hyperactive. She just wouldn't slow down. And so I tried to type. Well, first I put the bassinet, when she was only like 6 months old, or younger, on my lap, and then I would type. But when I came to the end of a sentence and had to think about it, she would wake up and start fussing, and I quickly have to type that. It didn't matter whether it made any sense. I had to keep going. Well, that was too rough. So I changed to pencil on a clipboard so that I could literally drop the clipboard to grab my little girl. And the story I told you, I'll tell it again. That wasn't just my imagination, because when I turned away for 30 seconds to adjust the radio, I turned back, she opened her mouth, and blood came welling out. And I discovered that she had fallen, hit her mouth on the edge of the couch, cut her lip or tongue, I'm not sure what it was, but her mouth was full of blood. And I was horrified. And so after that, I made sure to keep my eye on her just about all the time.
I can definitely totally relate to that. Probably many other parents can too, because when you have hyperactive children, you take them with you to the bathroom and everywhere else you go because you don't dare turn your back.
Yes. We tried raising child. There was an expert on babies, Dr. Spock. Well, raising ours, we found out what Dr. Spock didn't know about children.
Yeah, my mom read the book too, and she said she threw it out. One piece of advice, well, I don't remember what it was, but whatever it was that she read, she thought this guy obviously has never had children, and threw it away.
Yes, I remember once I really tried hard to follow, tried to get, because my little girl wouldn't go to sleep at night if I weren't there with her. But I needed my sleep too. And they said, what you do is you just put them down alone, and the first night they'll scream for half an hour before they drop off. The second night it'll be 10 minutes. After that, there won't be any trouble. So I tried it. And for an hour and a half, I was there in the next room suffering as I heard my daughter screaming and screaming and screaming. She never stopped. And then I heard a sort of it paused, and there was sort of a choking sound. Uh-oh. I went in, and she had vomited, and it was blood red. Oh, no, oh. And I said, oh, wait a minute. She had cherry pudding for dessert. Oh. Nevertheless, that was the last time I tried that. I would stay there with her till she got to sleep. Hyperactive children are, you have to have one to really understand what it is. And the old-fashioned discipline, no, you could literally kill the child doing that. So I wrote in pencil. I wrote whole novels. For 17 years, I wrote novels in pencil, and when my daughter was asleep or later when she was in school, then I would type them up and had an assistant. It finally got to the point where she went off to college, and I realized I no longer needed to write in pencil. I no longer was in danger of dropping the clipboard. She was gone. So I converted almost overnight to the computer. And since then, that was in 1984. I was 50 years old. And it took a while to break in. Even then, the computers were well advanced, but not nearly as much as they are now. My word processor would only address half the capacity of the computer, so I couldn't write a chapter beyond about 3,000 words. The computer wouldn't hold it. So I had to have, if I had a longer chapter, I'd have to do it in halves or in thirds and then assemble them later. But as the computers advanced, it got better, and now I like the computer. It is almost as versatile as pencil, and it saves me a lot of typing time, and so I'm really not interested in, I still make notes in pencil, notes on stories. I made a note today in pencil, and then when I got to the computer, I transcribed it to the computer for my idea file. So my way of writing has changed instantly from pencil to computer. But as far as I know, it's what's in my mind that really counts. That is, I don't believe there has been any change in the nature of what I write from when I was doing it in pencil to when I was doing it in the computer. And there was an editor that thought it changed, but no reader. Sometimes I challenge the reader, say, can you tell when I changed from pencil to the computer? Can you tell by the text? And sometimes they guess wrong. They don't know. So that was my long, complicated answer to your simple question. Yes?
Well, even I think about computers. My first computer was a Commodore 64. And it was pretty limited compared to today's computers. I can remember getting a magazine every month, and they would have these pages of code that you entered to write a new program. I would type this code up and make a program. It might be a game. It might be some sort of an application. And, of course, I did use it for word processing. And I can remember, for all those people who hate spell check, I can remember being curious. I'm a naturally good speller. Spelling comes easily to me. The rules of punctuation are fairly easy to me. Yeah. So I didn't really need it in the same way. Like my daughter, spelling and punctuation's never been exactly her forte. She's much better than she used to be, but lots of smart people don't do well with spelling. Anyhow, I'd written a single-page business letter. Single page, real, maybe 2 paragraphs, not a whole lot there. And I was curious about the spell check program on the word processor on that old Commodore. So I clicked the button for it to do its thing. Like 2 or 3 hours later, I got my computer back. Okay, obviously, word processing and spell check's gone a long ways. I used to despise it because it always had such a limited vocabulary that most words appeared as a misspelling.
It was similar for me. Originally, I wouldn't bother with a spell. I knew how to spell. But I use it all the time now. It's not for the spelling so much. It's for the typos.
Yes, it's wonderful for that.
And it thinks it's a misspelling. That's fine. It catches it, which is what I want.
I tend to put my lettering, the text, that's font, so small that sometimes I'm not seeing it very clearly, or maybe I need new glasses, one or the other. Anyhow, I know that there's certain things that are apt to happen, like I know which there is used when. I don't have any problems with that, but sometimes I get letters out of order. I don't know why it happens on there. And the word milk is often, instead of M-I-L-K, it'll be M-L-L-K. Now, I know how milk is spelled. Why do I get two L's and no I? I don't know. But I do.
Yes, your fingers don't keep perfect time with your brain.
Yeah, and as far as handwriting goes, handwriting for me is now a physical agony. For one thing, my right arm is the affected arm, and I'm also right-handed. But being out of practice to begin with, even before I got hurt, I didn't write much by hand anymore. It's like, I'm one with a keyboard. I think with a keyboard. It just makes sense to me. I don't think I wear off the letters. So you can't see my letters on my laptop anyhow. And recently I had my laptop crash, so I'm using my old laptop after some work was done on it, so it was functional again. But the letters are gone when I went back to this one, and the keyboard's slightly different arranged, but the grooves are all in the right place. Because I even wear a groove into the space bar and so forth and so on, and it just feels right, once you get used to that keyboard again. But I am. Do you get that kind of connection with your computer?
Everything is a little different for me. Way back, the QWERTY keyboard system was designed to be inefficient.
Right.
So the keys wouldn't jam. That's no longer a problem, but the keyboard is still there. I said, if I type two-finger, if I ever learn touch, it'll be on a more sensible keyboard. Then the Dvorak keyboard came along. So I jumped and I learned touch on the Dvorak instead of two-finger on the QWERTY keyboard. And the funny thing is, I'm not actually faster or more accurate on it. What it did say to me is I had carpal tunnel syndrome in both ends. Well, when I switched over to the better keyboard and also to the ergonomic keyboard, that eased that. But many don't know about the Dvorak, and my keys on the computer are marked with the QWERTY, so that if I look at them, I'm in trouble. I have to type touch because I have to ignore, only the A and the M are the same in those two keyboards. So, and nobody else could use my computer because if they're trying to type QWERTY, it just wouldn't work. I mean, my keyboard is different. I programmed it so that grooves and so on, it's different.
I can, as somebody, I was taught to type in school when I was like 12 years old. So I've been typing a very, very long time. And before these ergonomic keyboards came out and the Dvorak was available, I'd been already typing for a long time. And I remember trying them because I thought, this really makes sense because, the QWERTY keyboard was designed to slow you down. And I used to jam up even, when they had the daisy wheels. Some of us that used electronic typewriters will remember the daisy wheel. I would screw up the daisy wheels too because I'd type in spurts. And I would spurt, so fast that it would just jam the thing up. Forget a manual or even the electric where they had the arms that came up because I was always jamming those. And the whole one with the keyboard thing, I guess, is what it was because I think in these spurts and then I would type in these spurts. And trying to use those keyboards, the different style that was designed to be faster for me, I thought would be great. Unfortunately, it was like being completely handicapped. I could no longer find the keys. And I tried it for about a month or so, and then I had to say, you know what, I'll just go back to the way I was doing it, because for me that's easier now. Maybe it's, slower, but at least it's a livable slower.
It's interesting. Different for me, that is, I was satisfied with Dvorak, but when the ergonomic keyboard came along, I really was surprised. And I said, but it was so different. It looks like a keyboard that the painter Escher has painted. I mean, it's curved. It's twisted around, and the keyboard is, doesn't look at all like. So I made myself use it for 10 days, just to give it a fair chance. And after the 10 days, then I went back to the other keyboard and tried it for maybe 30 seconds. I couldn't stand it anymore. And I went back to the ergonomic, and I've been on it ever since. So that was opposite from your experience.
Yeah, and that's probably why, the difference in experience is why they do have the different keyboards available. The only time I really noticed that the straight keyboard is typically used in a laptop is if, for some reason, I'm sitting in the car trying to type. You don't have the same sort of elbow room. And I don't care what you prop or what kind of lap desk you're using. For me, it is incredibly awkward. I don't like having to do it. Even when we take the computer along, and I'm working on something, I've found that it's really not real productive for me to try to do it while we're going down the road, because I'm not going to get much done. Yeah, we'll look at the scenery and smell the roses instead. And that's just, there again, it's a thing. For some people, my husband works with a keyboard in his lap, and he's happy. I'm not.
Okay, I presume when you're typing in the car that you're not driving the car.
No. No, typing and driving, that would, typing on a keyboard on your laptop would be far worse than texting while you're driving. And we all know texting while you're driving is not a good idea.
They say that it's as bad as drunk driving, the effect on the driver.
I've even gotten so that even if I'm wearing a hands-free headset, I don't want to talk on the phone. I feel as though I'm already challenged enough just driving, because along with the arm not working, I can't turn my head as well as I used to. So I feel handicapped when I'm driving. I don't want to add the additional distraction of trying to talk to somebody on the phone. I figure if it was important, they'll call back, right? Yeah. So, I'll admit that I used to talk on the phone while I was driving all the time. I don't anymore. It's just one of those things I guess I decided wasn't a good idea. Now, when you write all the time, and you said you release about 5 books a year?
Yes, I'm not. It's not a target. It's just that I can do a fantasy novel within 3 months, and a lot of what I've been doing are shorter novels, like 45,000 words, or novellas of 30,000 words. And so, for instance, this year in February, I wrote a short novel. It was a 40,000 word novel, and then the next couple of months, I wrote a Xanth novel, and then in another 1 month, I wrote another short novel. So that in the space of about 5 months, I had done about 3 books to be published. None of them in print yet, but it's what I've been working on this year. And when all you do is write, which is what I do, and I live for write. I write all the time. It's not a sense of duty. It's that I'm most truly alive when I'm writing. I love writing. I don't have to chain my. Theodore Sturgeon, who is arguably the finest stylist the science fiction genre has ever seen, one problem with him was that he didn't like to sit down and write. And I love writing. I always want to. So being turned out and publishers don't want all that amount of stuff from me. Okay, I self-publish. I'm happy to self-publish. Fortunately, I made enough money back when I was a bestseller so that I'm not in need of money. I can write what I want to, self-publish it. If it sells only 5 copies, okay, it will not affect my lifestyle. I have freedom, and I value that freedom more than the money, I think.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand that. I released my first novel this past spring after a life, because I write anytime I'm under stress. I would write. I would just write whatever. It might be poetry, it might be a story, but then they sat in boxes. I never submitted any of it. It would sit in boxes. Eventually, I would get too many boxes. I'd determine it was a fire hazard, and I'd have a big bonfire. And my family would say, "That's terrible. These are wonderful stories." And often I wouldn't finish the story. I'd write maybe 300-400 pages, and then it would sit in the box until I burned it. And I burned 20 years worth of stuff.
Crime.
And well, maybe I see it in a different way. But back then, when I was writing on a typewriter, I even had a typewriter that was no bigger than a laptop of today, and it was battery operated. That I used, and I wrote all the time, but I burned it. And I had the novel I recently released. I'd actually written the bulk of it in the first few months after getting hurt. It was my first pain management, because there again, you're in, anybody who deals with chronic pain, you're in a new world, one you don't really like. So the only solution is to escape it and go into your story.
Yes. What you're saying reminds me of something. A different writer, I don't remember his name now, but he said he used to write stories and just put them in his desk. He never did it, never marketed them. Then he got married, and his wife investigated. She found them. Without his knowledge, she started sending them off to publishers, and they started selling. They were publishable stories that he had never bothered, and so he became a published author thanks to his wife. And for me, to write something and never at least trying to market it, that's a crime. But I get fan letters from people saying how much they typically at Xanth, they escape to it, and they have terrible lives, and some of them they describe them. They really are awful lives. They need to escape somewhere, and they escape to what I've written. But you see, for me, I no longer have to escape to what other people have written. My escape is in the writing itself. I enter the world that I am writing. And every character, male or female, is really me speaking in one sense. So I'm in that realm. And I love that realm. It is an escape. Let's face it, mundane life, it's not that it's bad for me. No, it's fine. I've had marriage 57 years long. Everything's fine. It's just sort of dull. Whereas in my writing, it's not dull.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to it. The entire world is being created. Whether you're reading the book or writing the book, this world is being created around you. And when it's a good story, you're completely immersed in it.
Yes.
And it's just there. You're walking along, and you're sort of piggybacking inside somebody's head, and it's amazing. As far as it being in a form of escapism, there's nothing wrong with occasional escapism. Now, granted, if you never return to reality, there's a problem. But, escaping for a short time into this fantasy world sometimes can give a person the ability to come back and look at their problems all over again and deal with it.
I don't look down on escapism. You say for brief times, I don't look down on it for longer periods. And again, because when I was younger, I think I was about 12 years old, and I thought seriously about life, and I tried to be objective, and I concluded that if I could be given the choice of living my life exactly as it had been over again, or a choice of not existing at all, I would prefer not to exist. I mean, my life was simply not worth it. And it wasn't until I discovered fantasy and science fiction that I found something else that really was worth living for. I needed to escape. Now, of course, as I got older, when I went to college, when I got married, everything changed, and now if I had to live my life over the way it had been, I would live it over. It's been a good life. It just wasn't up until the time I was a teen. So I think escapism it can be necessary. It can be the only thing that's worthwhile for some people. And as I say, some of my readers told me of their lives, and they're horrible lives. And some of them are suicidal. Well, I could see why. I'd be suicidal if I lived that way. So I think escapism is fine.
Yeah.
Not just because I write it.
Yeah, it is. It's something that has always been sort of my safety valve, and I'm sure that's true of many other people. When life kind of gets overwhelming, and it happens to all of us at some point, you know, that whatever's going on, you can't do anything about it other than grit your teeth and just wait it out. You know, being able to escape sort of takes the pressure off and makes that waiting it out sort of thing, you know, a little bit easier to take. I have a little saying, you know, this too shall pass. That's true of everything, good or bad. You know, you wait it out, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and being able to get into that escapist world is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, I know that I had a question that was given to me way ahead of time. In fact, I had them, because they gave it to me shortly after we'd arranged the program, and it was about the story of a boy running away from home and hitchhiking to your house. Did he ever show up at your house?
Oh, yes. Yes, he was 15 years old, and his mother had remarried, and his stepfather apparently was abusive, and he just needed to get away from that, so that he figured out where I lived, came down, and he showed up at my gate. I was a little surprised. He'd come to live with me.
That was probably the biggest part of the surprise.
Yes, and I managed to talk him into going back home. And he wasn't a Florida boy. He'd come down from the north. He'd gotten an airplane flight, and he'd planned everything. Yes, the reason you heard about it was because there was a radio program I was on where he and another fan of mine were interviewing me, and they told that story, so that you know, many years later, decades later, he still remembered.
Yeah, because it's sort of one of these unusual events. I mean, even for the creator of Xanth and these other fantasy worlds, it still ranks as a definite memorable event.
These things happen, yes. Of course, one of the more memorable one was when a woman wrote to me and said her daughter had been in a car accident and was in a coma, was a fan of mine, and would I write a letter? Maybe that would bring her out of it. And so I did write the letter, and they read it to her, and it did bring her out of it. But that was when I discovered that she was almost completely paralyzed. And I later wrote that it was a book called Letters to Jenny. It was Jenny, and Jenny survives today. She's still paralyzed, was a drunk driver that took her out. Not only did he not care, they had to arrest him to make him come in to the trial for that. He was out fishing. He didn't like the inconvenience of come in and face the music. So I still write a letter each week to Jenny. I don't get answers because she's paralyzed. But it's just how one of these, my life has interacted with that of my fans on occasion, and it's just part of life. I'm glad to help people where I can. There was another case where a boy was killed, again, by a drunk driver. He'd been a fan of mine. He'd been writing a novel of his own, and his fans got together and asked me to finish the novel for him. And they sent it to me. I got permission from his parents and so on, and finished the novel, and it was published. It was called Through the Ice. It's a collaboration between Piers Anthony and Robert Cornwise. The irony there was that my collaborator was dead before I ever started. I never knew him. I never worked with him in life, only after death.
Mm-hmm.
It won a kind of an award too from one group. It was a successful novel, and again, just interacting with my fans. Glad it worked out. Actually, it's one of my favorite collaborations. I don't say it's my best one. It's a favorite because of the story behind it, and that story is also makes my least favorite. I mean, I would prefer that Robert Cornwise had lived.
Yeah.
That the collaboration had never happened. Because if he'd lived, he would have finished his novel himself. So it was out of tragedy that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I understand there are many writers who just sort of ignore their fans. They don't answer their fan mail. They don't pay any attention. One of them even called me naive for answering my fan mail. Well, I do answer my fan mail. Yeah.
Well, I know that because, I sent you off an email and asked you, would you come on the show?
Yes, well, normally writers would answer professional queries, but I answer the regular.
You'd be surprised at how many I've never heard from. Various kinds of authors or other people, and people that are not as well known as you. Maybe they've written 2 books.
Yeah,
and they give out these strange demands, and I'm like, look, I have this format. If it doesn't work for you, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go on. There isn't a lot of negotiating. I can't change the day of the week, and so forth and so on. This is when I do it. Are you interested? And I'm sorry, I can't accommodate you. Or even people that solicit me to come on the show and then have a list of demands. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, I wouldn't do this for, the Queen of England, so why would I do it for you? Trying to, compare it to, I can't change the day of the week. I can't change the time. I'm not going to pay you, and so forth and so on. It's like, this is a yes or no kind of thing, and as the saying goes, there are thousands and thousands of people that could appear on the show and be entertaining guests. I've considered myself very fortunate that you did answer the email and came on, and I greatly appreciated it. I'm not even, unhappy when I get one that says, sorry, I don't think that this program will work with my schedule or whatever. Just a polite response is nice sometimes.
Yes. No, I respond, and I respond even if I turn things down, and I do get invitations. Well, for example, I get invitations to attend conventions, fan conventions, and they'll pay my way there and all that and so on, and I turn them down. It's not that I don't like them, and it's not that I'm shy. It's that my wife does not have perfect health. She has to have infusions every so often, and she can't travel, and I'm not going to go without her. I'm not going to leave her home alone, so I stay home.
And I can understand that too.
Yeah, it's fine. As I mentioned before, we've been married 57 years. We're both in our mid to late 70s. We're getting old. I tell people the average American man my age has been dead for 3 years. So it is limiting in that sense. I used to go to conventions. I don't now, simply because the act of traveling is too difficult.
And I can relate to that too, because I used to love a road trip. I mean, I really loved road trips. I don't care where we're going. Let's go, Now, because of the fact that I have problems with my neck and back, car rides can be very, very uncomfortable, and there is not much fun left in them.
Yeah, your original attitude reminds me of Edna St. Vincent Millay, a poetess, and one of the things she said was, there isn't a train I wouldn't take, no matter where it's going.
I've seen some cool things, on random road trips. I always loved a detour because that's when you saw the best stuff. One time we happened into an Amish community in the state I actually graduated from high school in. I didn't even know they existed there. We saw shock corn and lots of other cool things, and including, I was always told Amish people were standoffish, and instead they were practically falling out of their wagons to wave at us. It was a completely different experience, and it was fun. Another time, we happened on a Dutch windmill in South Dakota. Okay, could I ever find this windmill again? No. There was this big Dutch windmill. I don't know why it was there. I know the area had been settled by a lot of people from the Netherlands, but why this windmill was there, I don't know. And I learned a long time ago, stop and do the weird stuff. We've all heard of these roadside attractions, tourist traps, Some of them are really, really entertaining.
Yes.
Yeah, so I will stop and see the world's largest ball of string or, whatever, and have fun doing it. Yeah, slow down.
Yes, I can see traveling could be fun. As I say, but because my wife and I are getting older, it isn't the fun it used to be. So it's fun. But, of course, all this is dated, about answering fan mail. I get an invitation. I politely tell them no, and I tell them why. And so, to me, each person that writes, whether a fan or not, it's a living, breathing person whose life is just as important to him or her as mine is to me. And it has the energy to write me a thoughtful letter. I have the energy to answer it. It just makes sense to me.
It does. And another misconception a lot of people have is that authors have this lifestyle of the rich and famous. All this excitement in their life.
There was going to be a movie based on my book, Letters to Jenny, and they had a completely fictionalized idea. It was supposed to be based on me, and this author had his own airplane, and so on. It had nothing to do with me in reality.
Yeah, and another thing, a lot of people think that authors have this somewhat glamorous thing going on, where they're drinking martinis or whatever, and spending a lot of time in bars and doing national travel and so forth and so on. I guess it's Hemingway on crack or something. I would categorize it more as a solitary sort of lifestyle. I mean,
that's the key. It is solitary because I don't drink for the same reason I don't drink and write, for the same reason I don't drink and drive. It's dangerous. And so are drugs. I stay off everything. Anything that might affect the functioning of my mind, I don't want. Mm-hmm. And so I want it to be 100% there for the writing all the time. And so glamour, no, it's dull. And actually, that's pretty much the way I want it, because distractions just take me away from writing, and I'd rather be writing.
So during the course of a day, what would a person see Piers Anthony really doing?
Well, I don't know whether today is typical, but I keep a record of what I'm doing for each day.
Uh-huh.
And today, let's see, I have it on the computer. My wife had to go into the hospital for a blood test, and I don't let her go alone, so we went in for her blood test. And then I wrote 250 words summarizing an aspect of a story I would like to write. And I was finishing up my every month I do a High Piers novel, and I had another 350 words to write on that. I had to catch up on my accounts, so I spent half an hour on them. I had a vitamin order I needed to make. I spent 3/4 of an hour on that vitamin order. These are all odds and ends, not really writing, because at the end of the month I catch up on chores. I don't like it. That's why they're chores. But I do them. And after the month clears and I get next month, I'll be able to get back to writing. I'll probably write that story that I was making my notes on, titled Feral Femme, F-E-M-M-E. Idea being, some animals, dogs that go wild, cats, they become feral animals. Doesn't mean they're vicious, it just means they had to learn how to live in nature, no longer having a human home. In this case, it's a girl. It turns out having gone feral. And so the story is based on that.
It sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it intrigued me, and so I will write a story on that, probably middle of next month. That's one of the things about me. I get ideas when I'm in the shower, when I'm riding a bicycle for exercise. I summarize them. I have a huge file of story ideas, and then later when I need an idea, I go to that file and check through and find what I need, and there it is. Works fine. I don't like the idea of ever having a good idea and losing it. That would be a horror. That's like a life being lost.
Yeah, sort of like when I was telling you about burning all those stories, over the years.
Horror, burning them. Oh, yes. If I were in your place, I would summarize them and save the summaries at least.
Yeah, I guess in the day and age of digital storage, it's much, much easier. I no longer am creating fire hazards. And so I do keep them. And sometimes they I lose interest in them for a while, and so I may come back to them later, or whatever. But they sit there.
I did burning just offline. It's a story about somebody else. Stephen King, the writer, way back, his early novel, Carrie. He tried to market it, he tried to sell it, and about 30 publishers had rejected it. So he took it out to burn it, and his wife stepped in and said, no. And she wouldn't let him burn it. She made him keep submitting it. And that finally was a novel that made his fame.
Yeah.
Well, boy, thank fate for his wife. She had more common sense than he did. Burning something? No. I can't stand the thought.
Yeah, well, like I said, I guess for me, the entertaining part was creating the stories. And now I'm seeing a new side by letting other people read the stories. Because I didn't used to, I didn't care about that part. All I want to do is write them.
Once you have a story, it's like a baby. You don't want to kill it. You want to let it go and live out its life as fully as possible.
That's true. But we are running out of time. Folks, if you want to find out what Piers Anthony is up to, you can check out his website at highpiers.com. That's HIPIERS.com. And he's got all sorts of information there for you. Do you have any last words for everybody, Piers?
Nope. I'm happy the way I am.
Okay. Well, folks, we are out of time. I do have one more announcement before we finish, though. For a few more hours, there's a promotion for a newly released cookbook on Kindle, which means you can get it absolutely free. So go check out bit.ly/Gia Books, and you can get a copy for yourself. It's all about making homemade mixes. Woo! So I hope that tonight's program has given everyone plenty of food for thought, as well as more illumination for your own personal journey towards truth. Tune in again next week as we embark on a whole new topic, as we're going to be hearing from a well-known humorist, Gene Robertson. And then on August 13th, we'll be starting a new series featuring Native American writers who happen to all contribute to the book Unraveling the Spreading Cloth of Time. So, with all of that to tease and tantalize you, I bid you all farewell. It's been fun, and you've been listening to The Dawn of Shades, and I'm your host, Gia Scott. Good night.
If you are listening to the show and wish to join us in the chat room, visit